Hey, in this video I'll be showing you how to repair the yellow light of death on your PlayStation 3. Typically the PlayStation 3 gets the yellow light of death when there's an error in the motherboard as a result of dried up solder becoming brittle and cracking, causing breaks in the connection on the motherboard. This is under the GPU and CPU typically. Most often the GPU, as it causes the most amount of heat. Some things that tend to cause the yellow light of death, or lead to it rather, is dust and poor air circulation around your PlayStation. What ends up happening is the solder tends to sweat out what flexibility it has, what resin it has, and the resin that is what gives it the flexibility. So as soon as that's gone, it becomes brittle and cracks. So I'm opening up the PlayStation and cleaning it up with the paper towel and some isopropyl alcohol, and make sure it's nice and clean. If you'll notice on this PlayStation, there's a discoloration defect on that GPU chip. So your GPU and CPU should be nice and clean when you go about doing this. So as I mentioned earlier, it's the lack of flexibility in the solder on the motherboard that is causing this yellow light of death. So what we want to do is we want to add a little bit of flexibility to that, to the connections under the GPU and CPU again. And one way we could do this is by adding a little bit of flux. Solder is very difficult to absorb new flux, so there's only a very small percentage of flux that's going to go in there. Here, this is the no-clean kind I get from a local shop in Montreal. It's the place is called Accesstronic, and the price is $14.50 for a big bottle, liter of that. I put it in a small tube with a pin needle on it, and I go along the edge of the CPU and GPU until it starts to flow out the other side. You can see it start to build up and then start to tear up there. Then the next step, as you all expected, is we grab our $15 Canadian Tire heat gun. And what I like to do is I built a mount so I don't have to tend to it, and I position it right above the GPU, about 1.5 inches above to 2 inches above the GPU. I make sure it's nice and centered. I put it on the lower setting because there's two settings on this particular one, and I leave it on the GPU for about 25 minutes. Once that's done, I come back and I move it, the heat gun, not the motherboard, over the CPU, and I do the CPU for about 20 minutes. The reason I made this contraption is it's much easier than holding a heat gun. Your next option is to get a reflow machine set up. Infrared is probably the best kind. Once I'm all finished with the heat gun, I turn it off and I put something above the CPU and GPU. I make sure it doesn't put any pressure on it. I don't want to push down, but I don't want it to dissipate the heat too quickly. I don't want it to cool down too quick, as of course, as you may figure, drastic changes in temperature is going to cause different materials to change shape. It's going to flex because there's different materials made in that board. So I put that over there and I let it cool for about 40 minutes to an hour. Next thing I do, once it's cool, I grab my silicone-based thermal paste. You don't need the Arctic Silver here above the CPU, GPU. It's really not necessary. The reason is those metal pieces above the CPU and GPU is actually extra pieces of special metal alloy Sony came up with so that it dissipates the heat much better. Underneath those two pieces of metal is actually like the silver-based thermal paste and thermal adhesive. If ever you have that issue where the fan just starts to overheat too much, it's more than likely you have to remove that metal piece from the CPU and replace that with Arctic Silver underneath. Okay, so now that we have that together, make sure all the screws are in, get everything together, and the power button is on the back. I'm going to try this, and I'm going to first make sure the video settings have synced up with the video output. As I expected, everything worked out great. Now this should be a long-lasting repair since we did use the flux, which adds resin to the solder in the motherboard again. And this was an easy way to do it cheap. You got a $15 heat gun, you get some $15 liter of flux at your local electronics store, and get some isopropyl alcohol, some paper towel, and screwdrivers. That's it. That's basically all you need and you're good to go. So I hope this has been informative. I hope this has helped someone. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Have a nice day.